He thought I was just a simple nurse while he built a secret empire in my name. Now, he's a fugitive and I own his legacy. I've been married to Mark for 7 years. I thought we were the power couple of our suburban neighborhood in Seattle. He's a high-end real estate developer, and I'm a senior surgical nurse. We had the perfect house, the perfect dog, and what I thought was the perfect trust. But 3 weeks ago, my world didn't just crack, it imploded. It started with a mundane mistake. A stray piece of mail fell behind the radiator in our home office. I only found it because I was looking for a lost earring. It was a property tax bill for a luxury estate in a county 3 hours away. A property I didn't know existed. But the kicker? The owner wasn't Mark. It wasn't a company. It was me. My name, my social security number, and my forged signature were all over the deed. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. I didn't own a second home. I checked our joint accounts. Everything looked normal. But then I dug deeper. I hired a private forensic accountant using my own savings, and what she found was sickening. Mark hadn't just opened one secret account. He had opened 5. He had been siphoning small amounts of my salary for years, layering them through shell companies he created in my name. He wasn't just cheating on me financially. He was using me as a human shield for a massive, illegal real estate scheme. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was the why. I drove 3 hours to that address on the tax bill. I expected a vacant lot or a half-finished house. Instead, I found a multi-million-dollar modern mansion, complete with a nursery and a woman who looked exactly like a younger version of me, playing in the front yard with a toddler. My heart didn't break. It turned into a block of ice. I didn't confront them. I didn't scream. I just took pictures, drove back home, and waited for Mark to come back from his business trip in Vegas. I had 48 hours to decide if I was going to be a victim or the architect of his absolute ruin. And let's just say, I've always been very good at my job. The drive back from that secret mansion felt like a descent into a cold, dark ocean. Every breath I took felt heavy, filled with the realization that my entire life was a carefully constructed lie. Mark texted me as I pulled into our driveway. "Vegas is exhausting, babe. Wish you were here to help me unwind. Miss you." I stared at the screen until the light dimmed. The audacity was breathtaking. He was likely sitting in a high-stakes lounge, probably with the very money he'd stolen from my future, while his other family was tucked away in a house paid for by my credit score and my professional reputation. I didn't reply. Instead, I went straight to the basement and opened the heavy steel safe Mark thought I never looked at. I knew the code. It was our wedding anniversary, a date he used as a tool of deception. Inside, I found the folders. Dozens of them. He hadn't just used my identity for one house. He had used my clean financial record to guarantee loans for his riskiest developments. He was using me as a legal firewall. If his projects failed, I would be the one going to prison for fraud, while he walked away with the offshore accounts I just discovered. But then I saw it. The cross contract. It was the one project that had made him a star in the industry, and the one he had stolen from his former mentor-turned-bitter rival, Victor Thorne. Victor didn't just hate Mark. He wanted to see him erased from the map. A plan began to take shape, a plan so calculated it made my own hands shake. I realized the mansion wasn't just a home for his mistress. It was the primary collateral for his new skyscraper project. If that mansion changed hands, his entire empire would collapse like a house of cards in a hurricane. I spent the night downloading every encrypted file, every forged signature, and every proof of his double life. By 4 a.m., I wasn't a grieving wife anymore. I was a predator. I reached out to a contact who knew Victor Thorne's private fixer. I told him I had something Victor would give his soul for. The game was no longer about survival. It was about total annihilation. I was going to sell the roof over his secret family's head to the man who hated him most, and I was going to do it before Mark's flight touched down on Monday morning. My husband thought he was playing me, but he forgot one thing. I'm the one who handles the life support in the operating room. I know exactly when and where to cut to make sure there's no recovery. I met Victor Thorne in his penthouse office on Sunday morning. The place felt less like a home and more like a predator's nest, all polished steel and glass overlooking the city he helped build. He was a man who didn't need to shout to be terrifying. His silence did the work for him. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid the deed to the secret mansion on his obsidian desk, right next to the stack of forged loan documents I'd pulled from Mark's safe. Victor picked up the deed, his eyes scanning the address. A slow, cold smile spread across his face, like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Mark always did have expensive tastes," he murmured, his voice a low gravel. "But using his wife's identity to house his mistress as collateral? That's sloppy. Even for him." I looked him dead in the eye. "I'm not just offering you a house, Victor. I'm handing you his throat." I explained that the mansion was the keystone collateral for Mark's massive new skyscraper project. "If you own this property by Monday morning," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through my veins, "Mark owns nothing. His lenders will panic, call in the debts, and he'll have nowhere to hide. His entire house of cards collapses instantly." Victor looked at me with a new kind of respect. "You're not here to make a sale, are you?" he asked. "You're here to order an execution." I didn't flinch. "I want him bankrupt. I want him exposed to the world for the fraud he is. And as a bonus, I want you to be the one who personally serves the eviction notice to his girlfriend." Victor actually laughed then, a chilling sound that sealed our unholy alliance. We called in his elite lawyers on a Sunday. The sale was unconventional, brutal, and lightning fast. By 2 p.m., I had signed over the property I never wanted to own to the man my husband feared most on this earth. I left Victor's office with a cashier's check for a fraction of the mansion's value, just enough to finance my new life, and the grim satisfaction that I had just lit the fuse on a bomb that would obliterate Mark's entire existence. As I drove back to the house that was no longer a home, my phone buzzed with a notification. Mark's flight from Vegas had just landed. It was showtime. Mark walked through the front door at exactly 6 p.m., looking every bit like the charismatic, successful man the world believed him to be. He was wearing a custom suit, carrying a designer bag in one hand, and a bouquet of lilies, my favorite, in the other. "I missed you so much, Sarah," he said, pulling me into a hug that made my skin crawl. I forced myself to stay limp, to lean into him, playing the role of the doting wife one last time. "How was the trip?" I asked, my voice as smooth as glass. He launched into a series of elaborate lies about meetings with investors and late-night dinners at the Bellagio. I sat across from him at the kitchen island, watching his lips move, marveling at how easily the deception flowed from him. He handed me a small box, a diamond bracelet, a peace offering for a crime he didn't know I discovered. To many more years of us being a power couple, he toasted with a glass of wine I had poured for him. I smiled, but inside, I was counting down the seconds. I knew that at that very moment, Victor Thorne's legal team was filing the final paperwork that would effectively strip the land from under Mark's biggest project. The skyscraper, his legacy, was currently sitting on ground owned by his worst enemy. Mark's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, a small frown appearing between his brows. It was an email from his lead architect. "Just a minor technical glitch with the site survey," he muttered, dismissing it. He had no idea the glitch was actually a total system failure. He started talking about our future, about moving to a bigger place next year, maybe even investing in some property out in the country. He was trying to plant the seed for the mansion he'd already built in my name. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated hatred. He was so confident in my ignorance, so sure that I was just a simple nurse, who didn't understand the complex world of high finance. He didn't realize that in my world, we don't just treat the wound, we identify the source of the infection and cut it out. As he went upstairs to shower, his laptop stayed open on the counter. I saw a notification pop up from his private bank. "Urgent, collateral verification required." The first domino had just been pushed. The night was young, and the storm was just beginning to brew. I sat there in the silence of our perfect kitchen, sipping my wine, waiting for the first scream of realization to echo through the house. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was the ghost in his machine, and I was about to turn the power off. Mark came downstairs 15 minutes later, smelling of expensive cologne and wearing a fresh linen shirt. He looked like a man without a care in the world, completely oblivious to the fact that the floor beneath him was already gone. His phone didn't stop vibrating. It was a frantic, rhythmic buzzing that seemed to fill the entire kitchen. He picked it up, his expression shifting from relaxed to irritated, then to a sickly shade of gray. "What the hell?" he whispered, his thumb scrolling frantically. I stayed in the shadows by the window, my face partially hidden by the steam from my tea. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked, my voice dripping with fake concern. He didn't answer. He was staring at an email from his legal department. His hand started to shake, just a tiny tremor at first, but it grew until he had to set the phone down on the granite island. "There's a mistake," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "A massive, impossible mistake at the county recorder's office. They're saying the title for the Pinecrest property has been transferred. Sold." He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a panic he couldn't hide anymore. "Sarah, I need to go to the office. Right now. Some idiot in accounting has messed up a major transaction." I didn't move. I didn't offer to help. I just watched him scramble for his keys. "The Pinecrest property?" I asked, tilted my head like a curious child. "I don't remember us owning anything called Pinecrest, Mark. Is that one of your new developments?" He froze, his keys halfway to his pocket. He realized he just admitted to owning a property I wasn't supposed to know about. He tried to pivot, his brain working overtime to construct a new lie, but the sheer weight of the crisis was breaking his focus. It's a technicality, Sarah. A corporate asset held in trust. I'll explain later." He was sweating now. Despite the air conditioning being set to 68 degrees, he grabbed his laptop and ran toward the door, but before he could reach it, his personal cell rang. The caller ID was visible from where I stood. It was the mistress. The woman from the mansion. I watched his face turn from gray to a ghostly white. He didn't answer it. He looked at me, then at the phone, then back at me. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a scalpel. He knew something was deeply, fundamentally wrong, but he still couldn't imagine that I was the one holding the remote control to his destruction. "I have to go," he repeated, his voice cracking. He practically fell out the door, tires screeching as he pulled out of the driveway. I sat back down, opened my own laptop, and sent a one-word text to Victor Thorne. "Triggered." The hunt was officially on. Mark's car screeched into the parking lot of his corporate headquarters, a gleaming tower that was supposed to be his monument to success. I watched from a distance, parked in a dark corner of the lot, my heart drumming a steady, vengeful rhythm. He practically sprinted to the glass doors, but he didn't even get his keycard out before two large men in suits stepped into his path. They weren't his security. They were Victor Thorne's private enforcement. I could see Mark's silhouette through the glass, waving his arms, his face distorted by a mixture of rage and sheer, unadulterated terror. One of the men handed him a single, thick envelope. It was a formal notice of immediate seizure of all assets tied to the skyscraper project. Because I had sold the mansion, the primary collateral, to Victor, the bank had triggered a cross-default clause. In layman's terms, Mark's entire corporate empire was being liquidated within the hour. He stumbled back, his phone ringing again. It was his mistress, probably screaming that there were moving trucks at the secret mansion. I decided it was time to join the party. I stepped out of my car and walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking on the pavement like a countdown. When he saw me, his eyes nearly popped out of his skull. "Sarah!" "Thank God!" he yelled, trying to push past the guards. "Victor Thorne is trying to steal everything. He's claiming you sold him the Pinecrest property. Tell these idiots it's a mistake. Tell them you didn't sign anything." I stopped 5 feet away from him, the cool night air feeling like a victory lap. I didn't say anything at first. I just pulled out my phone and played the audio recording I'd made of him talking to his mistress months ago, a clip I'd found on a hidden recording device in his car. His own voice filled the lobby, whispering promises of a new life once he finished with the nurse. Mark went dead silent. The color drained from his lips. "You knew," he whispered, the realization finally hitting him like a freight train. "I didn't just know, Mark," I said, my voice as cold as a surgical blade. "I orchestrated it. Every signature, every sale, every phone call. You thought I was your shield? No. I'm the one who pulled the plug." The look of total, pathetic defeat on his face was better than any diamond bracelet he could ever buy. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play, and it was the one that would ensure he'd never work in this city, or any other, ever again. I leaned in close, so only he could hear me. "The police are at the mansion right now, Mark. Not for the eviction. They're there for the offshore tax evasion documents I left on the kitchen counter. Have fun in federal court." Mark didn't just look defeated. He looked like a man who had suddenly aged 20 years in 20 seconds. The mention of federal court seemed to strip the air right out of his lungs. He tried to reach for my arm, a desperate, pathetic gesture of a drowning man reaching for a jagged rock, but I stepped back, my heels clicking with a finality that echoed through the empty plaza. "Sarah, please!" he choked out, his voice a jagged rasp. "We can fix this. We can talk to Victor. We can tell them it was a misunderstanding. Think about our reputation. Think about our life." I almost laughed. It was the first time in years I felt a genuine urge to let out a scream of pure dark joy. "Our life was a ghost story, Mark. And I'm tired of being haunted," I said, staring at him with a detachment that clearly terrified him. Just then, his phone erupted again. This time he answered. It was Elena, the woman from the mansion. Even without speakerphone, her screams were audible in the quiet night. "Mark, there are men here. They have jackets that say FBI. They're taking the computers. They're taking everything. They told me the house doesn't belong to us anymore. Mark, what did you do?" He dropped the phone. It clattered onto the pavement, the screen cracking into a spiderweb of light, mirrored by the shattered remains of his composure. He looked at me, his eyes searching for a shred of the woman who used to bake him cookies and wait up for him after long shifts. That woman was dead. I had buried her the moment I saw the tax bill behind the radiator. He frantically tried to open his banking app, his fingers sliding over the cracked glass. "I just need to move the Vegas funds," he muttered to himself, a frantic mantra of a man losing his mind. "I can hire a better lawyer, I can." He stopped. His screen turned red. A simple message appeared. "Account restricted. Please contact your administrator." My forensic accountant hadn't just found the money. She had worked with Victor's team to flag the suspicious activity across every single bridge account Mark had opened. Every penny he thought he had stashed away was currently frozen under a temporary court order. He was standing in front of his multi-million-dollar office, wearing a $3,000 suit, and he didn't have enough money in his pocket to pay for the parking meter. The transition was complete. He was no longer the architect of this city. He was just a fraud in a fancy suit, waiting for the handcuffs to click. I turned my back on him and started walking toward my car. "Where are you going?" he screamed, his voice cracking with a high-pitched desperation that made the guard smirk. "I'm going to sleep, Mark," I called out over my shoulder. "I have a 12-hour shift at the hospital tomorrow. People's lives are actually at stake there. Yours? Yours ended 5 minutes ago." As I drove away, I saw the blue and red lights of a patrol car turning into the lot. The timing was, quite literally, perfect. The following morning, I didn't wake up to Mark's voice. I woke up to the sound of the news. The headline was scrolling across every local station. "Real estate mogul under federal investigation for fraud and money laundering." But the real show started when my phone buzzed with a FaceTime request from an unknown number. I answered. It was Elena, the woman from the mansion. Her face was puffy from crying, and she was sitting in a cheap motel room. "He's calling me, Sarah," she sobbed, her voice trembling. "Mark is calling me from a burner phone, begging me to take the toddler and meet him at the border. He says he has a stash of cash in a storage unit." I sat up, my heart cold. "And why are you calling me, Elena?" I asked. Her response was the final nail in Mark's coffin. "Because he told me he loved me, but I just found out the business he said we owned together was actually a shell company in your name. He didn't just lie to you. He was planning to let me take the fall if things went south. He told me the mansion was a gift, but the FBI told me it was stolen collateral. I'm not going to prison for him. I realized then that Mark had underestimated every woman in his life. He thought we were just accessories to his ego. What do you want? I asked. I want immunity, she whispered. I have the location of the storage unit. It has more than just cash. It has the original ledgers he kept to hide the money from the IRS. I'll give them to the feds, but I need you to tell Victor Thorne to stop the eviction process for just 1 week so I can find a place for my son. I felt a strange flicker of something, not sympathy, but a shared hatred. Done, I said. I contacted Victor immediately. By noon, Elena had turned over the keys to the storage unit to the FBI. Mark was currently a fugitive, driving a rented sedan toward the Canadian border, thinking his loyal mistress was waiting for him at a rest stop in Bellingham. He had no idea he was driving straight into a federal trap set by the two women he thought he had manipulated perfectly. I spent my lunch break at the hospital watching the GPS tracker I'd hidden in his car weeks ago. He was moving north fast. He thought he was escaping to a new life, but every mile he drove was just bringing him closer to a concrete cell. He was alone, broke, and betrayed by the very person he traded my soul for. The irony was poetic. I went back to my patients, performing a complex heart surgery with the steadiest hands I've ever had. While I was saving a life, I was watching Mark's life bleed out on a digital map. The final act was about to begin, and I had a front row seat. The sun was setting over the rainy highway near the border when the trap finally snapped shut. I watched it all unfold through a live news feed from a local station that had picked up the high-speed pursuit. Mark's rented sedan was surrounded by 8 black SUVs. He didn't go down fighting. He went down whimpering. When they pulled him out of the car, he wasn't the titan of industry anymore. He was a disheveled man in a wrinkled suit, sobbing as the cold steel of the handcuffs locked around his wrists. The FBI found the ledgers Elena had pointed them to, uncovering a decade of financial crimes that reached the highest levels of the city's elite. Mark was charged with 37 counts of racketeering, fraud, and identity theft. But the true chef's kiss moment happened during his sentencing. I walked into the courtroom wearing the most expensive dress I owned, one I'd bought with the money Victor Thorne paid me. I didn't say a word. I just sat in the front row and maintained eye contact with Mark as the judge read his sentence: 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. His face was a mask of pure agony. He had lost his company, his mistress, his secret mansion, and most importantly, his dignity. As they led him away, he mouthed the word, "Why?" I simply tapped my wedding ring, which I had recast into a beautiful, sharp pendant, and walked out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. My divorce was finalized an hour later. Because of the evidence of fraud, the morality clause in our prenup was triggered, giving me 70% of his remaining frozen assets once the government finished its seizure. I didn't stay in Seattle to gloat. I sold our perfect house, donated his designer wardrobe to a local shelter, and moved to a villa in the south of France. I still work as a nurse, but only when I want to. Sometimes, I look at the news and see updates on the skyscraper fraud case, but Mark's name is already being forgotten, replaced by younger, more honest architects. Elena moved to another state with her son, starting over with the small settlement I secretly funneled to her through Victor. We aren't friends, but we are survivors of the same storm. I learned that you can build a kingdom on lies, but you'll eventually drown when the truth rains down. I am finally free. My bank account is full, my conscience is clear, and for the first time in 7 years, I can breathe without feeling like I'm inhaling someone else's deception. The surgery was a success. The cancer of my life has been removed, and the recovery is nothing short of beautiful. Before you go, thank you so much for staying until the end of this story. Your time truly means a lot to this channel, and your support is what keeps these stories alive. Now, I really want to hear your opinion. What do you think about what just happened? If you were in this situation, what would you do? Would you make the same decision or choose a completely different path? Imagine yourself in their place and tell us honestly how you would react. Your comments are one of the most important parts of this community, and reading different perspectives makes these stories even more powerful. If this story made you feel something, whether it was shock, anger, sadness, or understanding, please give this video a like, because it really helps the channel grow and allows us to bring you more real, emotional, and thought-provoking stories. And if you enjoy content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this journey. I'll see you in the next video. Take care.